our job now is to cover lesson 7.3, types of interest groups, but I'm going to start off with a minute or so here, refreshing our memories on what interest groups are and why people join them. Remember, an interest group, as we noted, is where groups have common interests and they attempt to influence policymakers. They do this typically through lobbying and campaign donations, so that means they use money. And the key idea here is that there are easy access points or multiple cracks for these interest groups to penetrate our government system. De Tocqueville, or de Tocqueville, however you want to say it, said and noticed as a French traveler to the States in the 1800s that this was easy, and people in the United States are always constantly working through their problems. James Madison reminded us of factions, and he said factions, which basically are today's equivalent of interest groups, are something that many Americans are part of. We know that social movements are different. Some social movements to note are the women's rights movement, civil rights movement, and Occupy Wall Street. We know that there are several pressure points that these interest groups can infiltrate our government system through. Neighborhood groups do that at a local level, at the city council and state level. State and national groups can infiltrate Congress at the state and national levels. Giant corporations like ExxonMobil can donate immense dollars to campaigns of presidents and congressmen and women. And we know that interest groups use courts to put pressure on lawmakers as well. We know that there's reasons to join interest groups, mainly because there's incentives, there's a benefit to it. So we have solidary benefits, we have material, and we have purposive. And we also know through Mancur Olson that there's going to be free riders. People don't have to join the group to get benefits from interest groups' work. All right, on to types of interest groups. I'm going to slide over here to my notes guide, fill in the missing yellow spaces, and be ready to pause. There's 5 tasks that you need to do in this lesson. I'm going to try to be quick with the notes. Pause the video if you need to catch up. First, types of interest groups. There's mainly 3: economic, environmental, and public interest. I know I said that labor was a separate one. I was wrong. Labor is part of this economic interest group. So here we go. Economic is clearly the biggest set of interest groups by far. There are business groups that infiltrate politics, and generally they are people that regulate. They're against the regulation of government, and they want to decrease, and they do not support increased taxation, so they want lower taxes. Agricultural groups are really working hard to keep the doors for migrants open from different countries, Mexico, Africa, Asia, it doesn't matter, because they need cheap labor, $7.25 or less an hour, to make a profit on their sales of their crops. Labor unions, these are super significant because they have massive numbers of people that can turn out for elections, and they typically all vote the same direction, Democrat or Republican. And they collect dues or fees to be part of the group or the union, and therefore have lots of campaign funds, and they have lots of volunteers to work door to door to raise awareness to a group or a politician's cause. Public employee unions, like teachers' unions, the NEA, for example, the WEA, Wisconsin Education Association, all work for higher wages for teachers, better working conditions, and sometimes, remember, when we do work in politics, and public opinion is always sometimes not followed. So in 2011, Wisconsin teachers lost a lot as Republican Scott Walker came in and tore down negotiating power for teachers and more. So here's your first task. I want you to skim over an article that is linked right here. This is not blue, but in your assignment it is, your doc. Click on it and find out how teachers were negatively impacted during Act 10. Just 1 or 2 things here in a sentence or so. Then go to page 21 and find out how poor Americans, the unorganized poor, impacted our country, or maybe don't impact our country when it comes to interest groups. Okay, now is a good time to stop and pause the video. Don't forget, by the way, to start up the video when you're done with those 2 tasks. All right, Task number 3 now is going to ask you to read page 222. I also have that linked here. Politics with a Purpose, and create a list of steps that you would follow in order to create your own interest group. You'll fill in these blanks right there. Okay, pause and do that now. Now that you're back, we're going to talk about environmental interest groups. A very good example would be Greenpeace, and they simply just do things that are going to help our environment, like cleaner air, cleaner water bodies like rivers and such. And I want you to do for your 4th task is research one environmental interest group. Go ahead and Google it. Maybe it's Greenpeace. Find out what they do to impact politics, policy, and elections, and then cite your source, in other words, your website of where you found it. Okay, pause and do that now. Now that you're back again, let's go on and talk about public interest groups. Public interest groups are another type. It is the 3rd type, our other 2 being economic and the other 2nd one being environmental. And now we're going to talk about public interest groups. Public interest groups basically means that the best interest of the overall community is being worked on. Okay, so it doesn't matter what color your skin is, what gender you are, it's in the best interest of everybody. And a good example is the ACLU. I better fix that for you right now. ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. Okay, they've worked for several decades working to promote equality for all people. Generally, enters into legal disputes, the ACLU does, that are related to Bill of Rights issues, equality, that people of color, for example, are treated fairly and equally to their counterpart white co-citizens. The most well-known public interest champion is Ralph Nader. He ran in the 2000 election. You weren't alive back then, but your parents would probably have heard of Ralph Nader before. But he's said to have created 60 public interest groups. That's quite a few. Now let's talk about the most well-known public interest group. It is called Common Cause. And I just want to give you a little background information on Common Cause. You can find more at commoncause.org. But Common Cause is a nonpartisan. That means they are not politically matched to the Democrats or Republicans. They're a grassroots organization. That means they work at the very local level, not at the state or generally the national level. Very localized, some state work, but mainly like city work. And they're dedicated to upholding the values of American democracy. It says, we work to create open, honest, and accountable government that serves the public interest, promotes equal rights, opportunity, and representation for all, and they empower all people to make their voices heard in the political process. All right, let's jump back. Now that you know about Common Cause, grassroots level work. There's one amendment that they really supported the passage of, and that is the 26th Amendment. And here's how you remember 26th Amendment. 2 plus 6 is 8, and add the word teen after it. 18-year-old vote. And back in I believe it was the 70s, it was completely legal with an L, not illegal, legal, allowable for an 18-year-old to go fight for our country over in Vietnam and to die, but they couldn't vote. So 26th Amendment supported the 18-year-old vote, and that's what that did. All right, MoveOn.org. MoveOn.org. It is a really well-known published interest group that has a big online presence. Here is a link here for more information. What I'd like you to do is to investigate this and write a short summary of MoveOn.org and about how it has impacted politics on and other U.S. policies, and put that summary right here. Shouldn't take terribly a long time. All right, point D, now that you're back, is Amnesty International. What does amnesty mean? Amnesty means basically just protection, your ability to go and find a better, safe place for you to live. Amnesty International works for human rights, greater human rights, and they document human rights abuses. So what they do is they typically help support those that are facing torture, freedom of expression, lack of freedom of expression, and that are really running for their lives. So they really help those in need in those torn countries, maybe like Syria or Russia, North Korea. Okay? Another public interest group that doesn't really matter what age you are to join it is the American Association of Retired People. Okay, little did I know that I, at 39 years old, could be a part of this group, and I'm not even close to retirement. So I can be a part of the AARP. And with that, it is a humongously large group that really works for, what's the word here? It's easily the biggest interest group, I guess. Human rights goes there, and biggest, it looks like I forgot to put that in. They're easily the biggest interest group because they have such a large following. 40 million people. It helped create great welfare programs like Medicaid and Medicare, and they helped push Congress to pass laws to support those programs. That's a public interest group because it does not matter what your race is, what your gender is, as long as you are, a member of the program and you're of old age. Usually this Medicare is, I think it's 65 and over, you qualify for that, and Medicaid is for the low income. Okay, they provide aid to the low income so that they may have meals, soup kitchens, and things like that, shelters for when it's cold in Wisconsin. They have a place to go. So it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your religion, it doesn't matter your gender. This public interest group, AARP, with 40 million people, they have a profound impact on elections. All right? Just imagine if all of these people, all 40 million, voted Republican or voted Democrat. That's half the votes that Biden got and more than half the votes that Trump got in the 2020 election. It's a huge following. So having an interest group push for certain things and support candidates, it can be extremely powerful when it comes to politics. All right, boys and girls, that wraps up lesson 7.3. Just going to highlight some of the things really quick. We've got 3 types. We've got economic interest groups. We've got environmental interest groups like Greenpeace, and we have public interest groups like the ACLU. We have Common Cause, we have MoveOn.org, and we have AARP. And the big idea with public interest groups is they're groups that work for the betterment of a community, whereas these other ones typically are working for specifics that might benefit a large group like Greenpeace does. But these economic ones are very, very more single group minded. They're working for one specific thing that may not benefit every single person in a population. All right, that's all I got for you, boys and girls. Great job. Keep up the great work. And I really appreciate all your attention to these tasks and to your notes. Great job.